The U.S. under cyber attack. J.P. Morgan Chase reporting a denial of service attack on its website. This after rogue cyber group Al-Qassam vowed another round of attacks against U.S. financial institutions in what has now become the group's calling card. And President Obama meeting with the CEOs today at the White House to discuss efforts to improve security in private industries. Here with an inside look at how Washington can fight back, former Secretary of Homeland Security Michael Chertoff, co-founder and chairman of global security advisor firm the Chertoff Group, which consults companies on cybersecurity. Secretary, welcome. We're thrilled to have you this afternoon.
Good to be on, Lori.
Okay, so you're saying cyber attacks here are an even bigger threat than al-Qaeda type terrorist attacks. Give me a sense of the magnitude of this threat and how fast it's growing.
Well, you're really dealing with three separate types of threats. One is the theft of intellectual property, a lot of it going overseas. That has a serious economic impact. You have the denial of service attacks on the banks. Those have become pretty intense recently. They can be a nuisance. They can interfere with people's ability to get access, but they're not fatal. And then there's the possibility of an attack on critical infrastructure, something that would actually damage a transportation system, a water system, a power system, and that could actually have real-life consequences, including the loss of life. So each of these is a serious problem.
So where are we now if the goal, as you're describing to us, of these cyber attacks is trade secrets, ID theft, again, stealing trade secrets, and there is the threat to human life? I mean, at what point will that be killing the ultimate goal?
Well, I think we're in several different places. With respect to the theft of intellectual property, I think the National Security Advisor spoke a couple of days ago about the need to really raise this with the Chinese in a vigorous fashion. They've got to understand that they're hurting themselves globally in terms of their reputation and their economic position by having a deserved reputation for taking a lot of intellectual assets. On the attacks that actually could be destructive, there we need to get the private sector involved in making sure they are investing the effort and the money necessary to protect their networks. The government has a role. It can certainly operate overseas. The government can share important intelligence, but much of the day-to-day blocking and tackling has to be done in the private sector.
And that's the president's goal today, right, Secretary? Meeting with these corporate business leaders to discuss ways of preventing future cyber attacks. But all this is going on against this national debate of how to rein in spending. So can anything practical really come of this meeting with the president today?
Well, I think, first of all, the private sector needs to invest, and that's not a matter of the federal budget. That's a matter of recognizing that it's as important to protect your assets from cyber attacks as it is to lock your treasury to make sure people don't steal your money. As far as the government's role, I think pretty much everybody predicts that even in a tight budget environment, the government is going to need to invest more in cybersecurity, and Director Clapper spoke yesterday about the fact that in the long run, if we don't make adequate budget investments in cyber, we're going to find ourselves on the receiving end of some very, very dangerous surprises.
So is this, protecting against cyber attacks, going to fall upon the private sector, given what you've just told me? Because we also learned this week that the Pentagon Cyber Command Unit will create 13 offensive teams by fall of 2015. So it's almost like you're working on two different fronts to solve this problem, but there might not be the money, right, from the government to really support that front.
Well, Laura, you're right. There are two different fronts. Look, the government generally takes responsibility for what we call the away game, what it does outside the country, particularly dealing with state adversaries. But in terms of our domestic networks, while the government can play a role in helping people and empowering people and sharing information, we don't expect the government to sit on everybody's private network and look at everything that goes back and forth. That's the responsibility that ought to fall on the private sector. And I think here what we're looking to do is set some standards, encourage people to make the investments they need to make, and then give them the information that they need to be intelligent about how they deploy their defenses.
Thank you for your take on this troubling issue.